Welcome to the deep dive, where we really plunge into the sources, the articles, the research, trying to pull out those crucial nuggets of knowledge so you can be truly well-informed.
And today, we're tackling a statement that just, well, it sends a shiver down your spine, doesn't it?
It really does. You wouldn't last a night in Jack the Ripper's London. Now, when you first hear that, what comes to mind? Is it purely, the image of this terrifying killer in the shadows, the gaslight flickering?
Yeah, the sort of bogeyman figure.
Exactly. Or is there something deeper, something more about the whole society itself that makes that statement just so chillingly true?
And that's precisely it. That deeper meaning is what our sources just keep bringing to the surface relentlessly. This deep dive, it isn't just about one monstrous individual, horrific as his crimes were.
Right.
It's really about dissecting the systemic failures, the failures of an entire society, the profound vulnerabilities that were just woven into the very fabric of daily life for ordinary people back in 1888.
And we're talking about the East End of London, specifically Whitechapel.
Yes, Whitechapel, a place often glossed over when we think about the grand Victorian era, the romanticized version.
The top hats and carriages version.
Exactly. But Whitechapel, it held this stark, brutal reality. It truly embodies that phrase, unlastable night.
That really sets the scene. So, okay, our mission for this deep dive is to properly unpack that historical context. What do the sources tell us about the societal weaknesses, the limitations of the investigation back then, and of course, the lasting cultural impact?
It's a journey, really, into Victorian London's dark underbelly.
Yeah, and we'll see how all these different threads come together to back up that chilling idea. We've gone through a lot of material articles, historical accounts, deep research to try and piece together the full picture for you.
And these sources are just invaluable. They let us connect the dots, to understand that intricate link between the Ripper's awful crimes and the broader societal conditions that didn't just passively exist. They actively fostered that kind of environment.
That's a key point. It wasn't just happening in Whitechapel. Whitechapel enabled it, in a way.
In many ways, yes. The sources give us multiple viewpoints on this mystery that just won't go away. They help us see it not just as a crime story, but as a reflection of a whole era. A mirror to humanity's darker side, maybe, but also its resilience.
So we promise you we're going to extract the most important insights, give you that shortcut to really understanding this grim but absolutely fascinating period.
Let's dive in.
Okay, let's start right there, in the crucible itself. Life in Victorian Whitechapel. Late 19th century. This wasn't some charming London neighborhood, not at all.
Far from it.
Our sources paint this really stark, almost visceral picture. Profound poverty, economic desperation, just grinding. A huge chunk of Whitechapel's population was struggling, literally minute by minute, just for the basics, food, clothing.
Bare survival.
Wages were terrible. Unemployment was rampant, especially for the working class, relying on jobs at the docks nearby or in the factories. Can you imagine just struggling every single day for a maybe spoiled meal, knowing one missed day of work could mean utter destitution for your whole family?
The air must have just felt thick with desperation. And the nature of the work itself, that's crucial here.
Yeah.
It fueled this desperation.
Yeah.
A lot of it was what they called casual labor.
Casual labor sounds almost benign, but it wasn't.
Not at all.
Hi.
Think about it. Zero job security. Zero income stability. You literally show up at dawn hoping to get picked for a day's work. Docks, construction sites. No guarantee for tomorrow.
Just day to day, hand to mouth.
Precisely. And then you had sweated labor, just arduous work in these cramped, dusty, incredibly unhealthy sweatshops, tailoring, dressmaking, shoemaking, people working unbelievably long hours for pennies, barely enough to keep going.
It sounded like a nightmare.
It was. And this deep economic insecurity, it wasn't just tough. It created this class of people who were, almost invisible economically.
Yeah.
Often off the books, no consistent records, hard to trace.
Which made them vulnerable.
Extraordinarily vulnerable. Easy to exploit, easy to ignore, and terrifyingly easy targets for a predator. That unlastable night we talked about.
Yeah.
It was born right out of this economic knife edge. Survival itself was a constant, terrifying gamble.
And if the money situation wasn't bad enough, the living conditions, oh my goodness, beyond squalid, pushing people to their absolute limits.
Yeah, the rapid population growth just crammed people in. Whitechapel was bursting at the seams, and it made the already terrible overcrowding and lack of sanitation even worse.
Our sources describe these tenements, these rundown buildings where whole families, sometimes multiple families, were crammed into a single room, No proper ventilation, no light, no sanitation to speak of.
You can almost smell it through the pages, can't you? The stench of unwashed bodies, old food, human waste,
Yeah.
thick, stagnant air.
Ugh. And this leads straight into the public health crisis, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Diseases we barely worry about now, tuberculosis, cholera, typhus, they weren't just occasional outbreaks. They were endemic, raging through the population
Fueled by.
by the appalling sanitation. We're talking open sewers running down the streets, piles of garbage just festering for weeks.
Yeah.
And the drinking water, unreliable, often contaminated, add to that London's infamous smog.
The pea supers.
Exactly, that thick, choking fog from coal fires and gas fumes, causing severe respiratory problems for everyone. And then you have the rookeries,
Rookeries. What were they exactly?
notorious slum housing areas, structurally unsound, literally falling down sometimes, appallingly unsanitary. Often these mazes of buildings, havens for crime because they were so hard to navigate or police.
And the sheer density of people.
It's staggering. Whitechapel had about 189 people per acre. Compare that to the London average back then, which was around 45 per acre.
Wow. Nearly 5 times as dense.
Think what that means. Disease spreads like wildfire. Privacy, an unimaginable luxury, just constant, close, unavoidable contact with sickness and squalor.
So, okay, imagine you're homeless in this environment, which many were. What were your options for shelter?
Grim doesn't even begin to cover it. Basically, you had lodging houses or workhouses. Both offered their own special kind of danger and indignity.
Lodging houses. I read they sometimes operated in shifts.
That's right. You'd pick a penny or two maybe for a bed, often just for an 8-hour stretch, meaning the sheets were likely still warm from whoever was in it before you. They were notoriously filthy, overcrowded, stiflingly hot, crawling with rats, shared dirty bedding. It sounds less like shelter and more like a breeding ground for disease and despair.
Just awful. And the alternative, the workhouse.
The workhouse. Victorian society's solution for the destitute. Yes, it offered a roof and some basic food, but it came with this massive social stigma. Being in the workhouse basically marked you as a moral failure in their eyes.
And the conditions were deliberately harsh, weren't they?
Deliberately, almost cruelly so. Backbreaking manual labor, monotonous, awful food, absolutely no privacy. Families were often split up. Silence was enforced. The whole point wasn't really to help people, it was to deter them.
Deter them from relying on public aid. Keep costs down.
Exactly. It was a brutal system. So for many in Whitechapel, these were the only choices. But neither offered any real safety or dignity. They just pushed people further into these incredibly precarious situations, making them even more vulnerable. That unlastable night wasn't just a metaphor, it was their constant reality. Perpetual uncertainty, perpetual danger.
And layered on top of the physical hardship, you had this intense social pressure cooker. Whitechapel was a melting pot, wasn't it? Lots of immigrants.
Very much so. A vibrant but often chaotic hub. Large numbers of Irish immigrants, Jewish immigrants, others from Eastern Europe, all settling there, looking for work, for refuge.
But that mixing didn't always lead to harmony.
No, unfortunately. It often led to deep-seated discrimination and tension between communities. Irish immigrants, for example, often face these cruel stereotypes. Drunken, violent, unreliable, just pure xenophobia.
And the Jewish immigrants.
Particularly those fleeing pogroms in Eastern Europe, they faced rampant anti-Semitism. Sometimes fueled by resentment over perceived business success, sometimes by baseless accusations of bad practices, or even just suspicion because they lived in close-knit communities. It was misconstrued as being deliberately separate.
And this connects directly to the Ripper case, doesn't it?
Critically, this volatile social atmosphere directly impacted the police investigation and how the public saw things. The anti-Semitism, for instance, meant suspicion fell unfairly on Jewish residents. We'll definitely talk more about the Goulston Street graffiti later, a prime example where prejudice literally wiped out potential evidence.
So prejudice could actually divert police resources.
Absolutely. Down blind alleys based on bias,
Yeah.
and it just inflamed social unrest. We also have to mention the pubs.
Ah, yes. Gin palaces and pubs were everywhere, right?
Saturated the area. Heavy drinking was incredibly common. Often it was just a desperate temporary escape from the grim reality of life. But it contributed massively to alcoholism and, tragically, a lot of violence. Another way to try and forget that unlastable night, even for a few hours.
And within this brutal ecosystem, one group stood out as exceptionally vulnerable: the prostitutes.
Tragically so. Our sources estimate around 1,200 prostitutes working in Whitechapel alone in 1888. A staggering number.
And the poorest among them.
The poorest worked directly on the streets. They couldn't even afford a room in a lodging house or brothel. This made them incredibly exposed, susceptible to assault, robbery, rape, just constant danger. Even those in the estimated 62 brothels still faced exploitation, violence, disease.
And how did society view these women?
That's a critical piece. The prevailing attitude was deeply unsympathetic. They were often labeled immoral, depraved, seen almost as disposable. Common targets for violent behavior is a phrase that comes up.
So there was this chilling lack of sympathy initially for the Ripper's victims.
Very much so, especially among the respectable classes.
Yeah.
A sort of, well, what do you expect attitude. It was systemic poverty that forced many women into this incredibly dangerous life, making them easy targets, not just for a killer, but for society's judgment and neglect. For them, the unlastable night wasn't a possibility. It was their daily, terrifying existence.
Finally, let's touch on the physical environment itself, the layout of Whitechapel. Because it wasn't just a backdrop, was it? It almost feels like an accomplice.
That's a really good way to put it. Our sources describe this incredibly cramped, unsanitary maze. Overcrowded tenements packed together, narrow, winding yards, badly lit alleyways, courtyards with multiple hidden entrances and exits.
A rabbit warren.
Exactly. And this physical layout wasn't just unpleasant, it actively enabled crime. It created the perfect conditions for a killer like the Ripper to operate and then just disappear.
How so?
Well, the dense, irregular buildings offered endless places to hide. A killer could vanish into the shadows in seconds. The maze-like streets provided countless escape routes, making pursuit almost impossible.
And policing must have been a nightmare.
Incredibly difficult. How do you effectively patrol that? How does a witness get a clear view of anything happening just a few yards away in some dark corner? And remember, that population density, 189 people per acre. A killer could easily melt back into the crowd, totally anonymous.
So this city's design itself...
It wasn't just passive. Through neglect, overcrowding, poor planning, it became an active participant, enabling the crimes, hindering capture. It chillingly suggests the very infrastructure played a role in these unsolved horrors.
Right. So into this desperate, squalid, volatile place, shrouded in fog and gaslight, steps Jack the Ripper, unleashing the autumn of terror.
Between August 31st and November 9th, 1888, at least 5 women, all working as prostitutes, brutally murdered in or right next to Whitechapel. These are the ones we now call the canonical 5.
The ones most historians agree were likely killed by the same person.
Exactly. They form the undisputed core of this mystery. And their fates. Truly tragic. Etched into history. First, Mary Ann Nichols. August 31st, 1888. Found in Bucks Row, it's called Durward Street now.
The first generally accepted victim.
Right. And incredibly, her murder was initially dismissed by some officials. Just a common quarrel, they thought. It shows that prejudice we talked about. But paradoxically, it also sparked this morbid cult of perverse fascination among the public, rather than actual sympathy.
And her injuries.
Severe abdominal mutilations, disembowelment, a sign of the brutality to come.
Then, just over a week later,
Annie Chapman, September 8th, found in the backyard of 29 Hanbury Street. Her murder really ramped things up. Unease turned into outright panic. People realized something truly monstrous was happening.
her injuries were worse.
Extensive abdominal and genital mutilations, organs removed. A clear escalation.
And then came the double event.
September 30th, a terrifying escalation in boldness. First, Elizabeth Stride, found in Dutfield's yard off Burner Street. It's widely thought her killer was interrupted.
Interrupted, how so?
Well, her throat was cut, but she didn't have the same extensive mutilations as the others. Perhaps someone came along, a cart maybe, and he fled.
And then, incredibly, on the same night.
Within the hour, just a short walk away, Catherine Eddowes, found in Mitre Square, which was actually in the City of London's jurisdiction, bringing another police force in. Her injuries were described as absolutely horrific, terrible facial and abdominal mutilations. And chillingly, the killer took a trophy.
A trophy.
Her kidney and part of her uterus were removed. This double murder just sent shockwaves through London. Unprecedented public outcry, intense fear.
And the final canonical victim?
Mary Jane Kelly, November 9th, found in her own small room in Miller's Court. The final, and many say the most gruesome, murder. Extreme mutilation, her body almost completely disemboweled, disfigured beyond recognition, a scene of just utter savagery that shocked even hardened investigators.
The pattern seems clear. Horrific mutilations.
Yes, that's the horrifying consistency.
Yeah.
Often involving disembowelment, removal of internal organs, often sexual organs, and this macabre detail. It served this strange, unsettling purpose in Victorian society.
How do you mean?
While people were officially shocked, these grotesque details also became this perverse outlet for a sexually repressed Victorian culture. It allowed public talk about taboo subjects, sex, violence, the body, but framed through this horrific lens. The public fascination with these violated intimate details says a lot about the era's hidden anxieties.
Forcing him out into the open in the worst way possible.
Exactly. And the nature of the wounds, swift, precise, yet savage, led to immediate speculation. Was he a doctor? A butcher? Someone with anatomical knowledge?
But opinions were divided on that, weren't they?
They were. Some argued the cuts were too crude for a professional. Others saw skill. This debate itself became part of the Ripper's mystique, feeding the public discussion.
And the public reaction overall, you said it was contradictory.
Hugely. On one hand, the murders captivated the entire country. They were titillating entertainment, perfect fuel for the growing number of penny dreadfuls, those cheap sensational magazines.
But on the other hand,
that initial reaction to Mary Ann Nichols showed a chilling lack of sympathy. Because she was a prostitute, the respectable classes just didn't care much, saw it as an occupational hazard almost.
that's profoundly disturbing.
It reveals this deep societal contradiction. Morbid, voyeuristic fascination with the gruesome details, side by side with this deep-seated dehumanization of the victims because of their class and profession. They were seen as immoral, common targets, essentially blaming them.
So public discussion was shaped by moral judgments as much as horror.
Absolutely. Rigid class divisions allowed for this detached consumption of the tragedy. But the sheer horror, the repetition, especially the double event that eventually aroused the public with horror, it led to a real crisis of conscience.
A crisis of conscience. Over what?
Over the failure of Christian charity, the failure of social organization to deal with the poverty and neglect in places like Whitechapel. Punch magazine called it the nemesis of neglect.
And didn't George Bernard Shaw say something cynical about it?
He did. He suggested the Ripper, ironically, did more for social reform than actual reformers, just by highlighting the horror. It shows how extreme violence forced society to finally confront the grim reality of the East End. A dark paradox. A murderer becoming a catalyst for change.
Okay, let's shift focus to the police investigation itself, which was, well, an elusive shadow trying to catch an elusive shadow.
Aptly put, the main responsibility fell to the Metropolitan Police, Scotland Yard. The City of London Police got involved only after Catherine Eddowes was killed in their patch.
And did they work together well?
Generally, they cooperated, but our sources make it clear there were significant disagreements, even infighting, among senior officers. Sir Charles Warren, the Met Commissioner, faced huge public criticism for how things were handled. He eventually resigned over it.
So problems right at the top.
It highlights the institutional immaturity of policing back then. Coordination, strategy, it was all challenged, tangled in bureaucracy and rivalries. But beyond that, the biggest hurdle was science, or the lack of it.
Forensic science was very much in its infancy, as the sources say.
In its infancy is putting it mildly. Think about what they didn't have. Fingerprinting. Scotland Yard didn't adopt it until 1901, years after the Ripper.
Wow, okay. What else?
Telling human blood from animal blood. Difficult, if not impossible sometimes with their methods. Systematically searching for trace evidence like hair, fibers, bodily fluids at the scene. Virtually non-existent. DNA. Centuries away. Unimaginable.
So they were operating almost completely blind by modern standards.
Completely blind. And the crime scene protocols, or lack thereof, made it worse. Bodies were often moved quickly, sometimes by well-meaning bystanders or overwhelmed constables. Scenes were cleaned up before any detailed examination.
Crucial evidence just gone.
Swept away. Doctors were called mainly to confirm death. Detailed examinations often happened hours later at the mortuary away from the scene, which led to shocking oversights like Nichols' disembowelment only being found later.
That's incredible.
And get this, for a quirk of the era. Some police actually believed if you photographed a victim's eyes soon after death, you might capture the killer's image reflected there.
Seriously.
Seriously, it just shows how primitive their understanding was. The only people with any scientific training were doctors, and their focus was medical, not forensic in the way we understand it. The case being unsolved isn't necessarily down to lazy policing. Sources say they worked hard and explored all leads. It's profoundly a product of the limits of their time. They just lacked the tools.
Limited science, shaky coordination, and then you add the media into the mix.
Oh, the Victorian media. Both a vital informant and a massive chaotic obstacle. Newspapers, those penny dreadfuls,
Yeah.
They covered the murders obsessively, often sensationalizing everything.
And sometimes just making things up.
Absolutely, fabricating facts, printing wild rumors, which inadvertently created this Potential trail of false evidence. Our sources stress this seriously hampered the official police investigation, just created confusion, misdirection.
But the press also criticized the police, didn't they?
They did, vocally, which put immense pressure on the police. But it's this double-edged sword. The rise of cheap, accessible newspapers meant the Ripper became a national obsession like never before. Unprecedented public awareness.
But at the cost of accuracy.
Exactly. Sensationalism, fabricated facts. It created this chaotic information storm. Police had to wade through it all, trying to find credible leads amidst the noise. It's an early, chilling example of the challenges law enforcement faces with rapid, unregulated information. Something we still see today, really.
And a prime example of how outside factors interfered was the Goulston Street graffiti. Tell us about that.
Right, this is a hugely contentious incident. A message was found scrawled on a wall near where a piece of Catherine Eddowes' bloody apron was dropped. Potentially written by the Ripper himself.
That sounds crucial.
You'd think so. But Commissioner Warren ordered it immediately washed off, wiped away, before it could even be properly photographed or documented.
Why on earth would he do that?
Intense fear of sparking anti-Jewish riots. The message was ambiguous, but some interpretations pointed towards Jews, and anti-Semitism was already boiling in Whitechapel. Warren prioritized preventing immediate public disorder over preserving potential evidence.
So political concerns and social prejudice directly overrode investigative procedure.
Precisely. It shows how the investigation wasn't happening in a vacuum. It was deeply tangled up in the social anxieties and prejudices of the time. This decision alone might have destroyed a vital clue, contributing directly to the case remaining unsolved. Bias can literally erase evidence.
So despite all the police efforts, tracing people, questioning witnesses, house-to-house searches, flooding Whitechapel with officers,
And they did put in considerable effort.
no public reward was even offered, which seems strange.
Yeah, possibly because they didn't want to seem incompetent or desperate, or maybe policy at the time. But the end result was the same. Despite all the activity, no suspect was ever formally charged with the Ripper murders. A profound failure, but one largely down to the severe limitations they were working under.
Which brings us to the suspects. This endless labyrinth of theories.
It really is a labyrinth.
Yeah.
He was never caught, never identified. His identity remains one of history's biggest criminal mysteries. It fuels endless speculation, this whole field of Ripperology. Hundreds of names proposed over the years.
Let's touch on a few key ones. Charles Lechmere, also known as Cross.
Right. He's interesting because he was there at the very first canonical murder scene, Mary Ann Nichols. He actually found her body.
And there's a fairly recent case made for him being the Ripper.
Yes, a book investigating Charles Lechmere makes a compelling argument. His route to work fits the killer's likely movements. He knew Whitechapel intimately. It's based on some meticulous geographical and time analysis, gaining traction.
Okay. Then there's Montague John Druitt, the barrister who drowned.
Yeah, an Oxford-educated man. His body was found in the Thames shortly after Mary Jane Kelly's murder. That timing made some high-ranking police officials like McNaughton suspect him.
But that theory's mostly dismissed now.
Largely, yes. Evidence puts him in Dorset playing cricket during the first murder. A solid alibi. And most experts think the killer was local to Whitechapel. Druitt lived miles away. The alibi and location really undermine it.
How about Karl Feigenbaum, the German sailor?
An intriguing one. Documented history of psychopathic behavior, confessed to mutilating women in New York later on. A seriously disturbed individual.
And the connection to the Ripper murders.
Shipping records place him on ships docked near Whitechapel during the dates of all 5 canonical murders. That's quite a coincidence. Plus, apparently his own lawyer came to believe he was the Ripper.
His own lawyer.
Wow. Yeah, that's pretty compelling. Makes him a plausible candidate for some researchers, suggesting this terror might have crossed the Atlantic.
Then the big one, perhaps. Aaron Kosminski.
Ah, yes. A Polish Jewish hairdresser living and working right there in Whitechapel. He was definitely a strong suspect for the police at the time. Chief Inspector Swanson's notes mention a Kosminski.
And wasn't there talk of an eyewitness identification?
Yes. Swanson claimed a witness identified him but wouldn't testify, possibly due to fear or because the witness was also Jewish and reluctant to testify against another Jew, given the climate. And Assistant Commissioner Anderson was convinced Kosminski was the man, but said he couldn't be prosecuted due to lack of evidence or the witness issue.
And then there's the recent DNA evidence from a shawl.
Right, the shawl allegedly belonging to Catherine Eddowes. It generated huge excitement. DNA analysis showed a link to a living descendant of Aaron Kosminski. Looked like the breakthrough.
But
But It's mitochondrial DNA. As forensic experts quickly pointed out, mtDNA can only exclude suspects. It can't definitively implicate one person. It's passed down the maternal line. So many people share the same mtDNA profile.
Yep.
It links to the family, not the individual.
Not the smoking gun.
Not the smoking gun everyone hoped for. Plus, we have to remember the police bias at the time against, as Anderson put it, low-class Polish Jews. That might have skewed their focus unfairly. So, strong historical link, yes. Definitive proof, no. Highly contested.
Okay, how about the artist Walter Sickert?
Famous or infamous suspect. Known for his dark paintings of London life, including prostitutes. Theories suggest he hid clues in his art.
And didn't a novelist claim DNA linked him?
Patricia Cornwell, yes. Highly controversial claim. She bought and even damaged some of his paintings looking for evidence. Most experts dismiss her DNA claims as unscientific, speculative. And crucially, Sickert wasn't a suspect at the time. The theory only emerged about 80 years later. More modern interpretation than historical investigation.
And the most sensational theory of all, royalty.
Prince Albert Victor, Eddie, grandson of Queen Victoria. The idea of a royal ripper.
Pure conspiracy fodder.
Pretty much. While it captures the imagination, serious historians consider it dubious. Official records place Prince Eddie miles away from Whitechapel during the murders. Solid alibis. Compelling narrative, but lacks historical basis.
What's really striking is how different all these suspects are. Prince, pauper, immigrant, artist.
Exactly. And that tells us something important. These profiles weren't just based on evidence. They were shaped by the biases, fears, and anxieties of the Victorian era, and later times too.
How so?
Well, the early idea of surgical skill maybe reflects fear of the educated elite gone bad. The focus on leather apron, or Kosminski, reflects anti-Semitism, blaming immigrants. Sickert's alleged impotence theory plays into Victorian hang-ups about sex and deviance. The huge range of suspects shows how different people projected their own preoccupations onto the blank slate of the unknown killer. The search became a mirror for society's fears.
Which brings us back to the limits of modern science in these old cases. The Kosminski DNA seemed like such a huge deal initially.
Monumental breakthrough was the phrase used. The promise of finally solving it after all these years. Headlines everywhere.
But the science just wasn't that conclusive.
Exactly. The nuance about mitochondrial DNA that it can exclude, but not pinpoint, highlights the massive challenge. Trying to apply today's forensic standards to evidence that's over a century old, collected with rudimentary methods, it's incredibly difficult, often impossible. Degraded samples, contamination, uncertain provenance like the shawl itself.
So it just adds another layer of frustration, another reason it stays unsolved.
Precisely. The past often resists our modern attempts to fully unlock its secrets, especially when the initial evidence is so flawed or missing.
And the chilling thing our sources reveal is Jack the Ripper wasn't the only monster stalking London then. There were other unsolved horrors.
That's right. It wasn't an isolated phenomenon. It highlights a broader landscape of danger and investigative failure. Let's talk about the Thames Torso murders.
The Thames Mysteries. Sounds ominous.
Equally chilling, perhaps even more so in some ways. A distinct series of unsolved murders of women between 1887 and 1889, sometimes called the Embankment murders too.
And how are these different from the Ripper's crimes?
The modus operandi was completely different. The series formally includes 4 canonical cases: Raynham, Whitehall, Elizabeth Jackson, Pinchin Street, plus other similar dismemberment cases, sometimes linked. The key feature: the victims' bodies were systematically dismembered, cut up, parts scattered in or along the River Thames.
Dismembered? How?
Medical examiners at the time noted the bodies were dexterously cut up by someone thoroughly acquainted with anatomy. It suggests real surgical skill. Unlike the Ripper's more frenzied, visceral mutilations, this killer dismembered with precision. No signs of the same kind of post-mortem evisceration the Ripper performed.
Wait, are you saying there might have been 2 different serial killers operating in London at roughly the same time?
That's the profoundly disturbing implication. Instead of just one maniac, maybe there were 2, each with their own horrifying signature, terrorizing the city concurrently.
That just deepens the horror of the era tenfold.
It absolutely does. And tragically, none of the Thames Torso murders were ever solved. Only one of the 4 main victims was even identified. It shows this broader, systemic vulnerability to crime, likely due to the same investigative limitations. A city grappling with multiple unseen threats. The different MOs, gruesome mutilation versus surgical dismemberment, hint at very different kinds of killers, even without modern profiling. Victorian London harbored various monsters. It truly amplifies that sense of an unlastable night.
And there were other notorious cases too, weren't there, beyond serial killers?
Yes, illustrating the wider spectrum of crime and investigative struggles. You had the sensational chloroform murder case with Adelaide Bartlett. Her husband died from chloroform. Was it suicide or murder by her and a clergyman friend? Gripping trial, but she was controversially acquitted. Lingering doubt.
And that Scottish case, Madeline Smith.
Ah, yes. The Madeline Smith case in Glasgow, a poisoning trial that captivated everyone. Steamy love letters read out in court, her incredible composure, ended with a Scottish not proven verdict. Basically acquitted, but with a shadow of doubt remaining.
And it wasn't just individual crimes, right? There was organized crime too.
Absolutely. To broaden the picture, sources mention organized female gangs, like the infamous 40 Elephants. They were known for large-scale, incredibly audacious shoplifting sprees across the country. Sophisticated criminal enterprises.
So from sensational murders to organized theft rings.
It all paints a picture of pervasive crime and the systemic difficulty in actually solving these cases back then. It adds real depth to this idea of unsolved horrors extending far beyond Jack the Ripper.
So what is the lasting legacy of all this? The Ripper murders, we know, captivated the entire country. Morbid fascination, yes, but you also mentioned a crisis of conscience.
It's a true paradox. Initial sympathy for the victims, as we said, was disturbingly low because of who they were. But the sheer escalating brutality, especially the double event and Kelly's death, eventually did horrify the public into indignation.
So horror overcame prejudice, eventually.
To some extent. The crimes bizarrely provided this outlet for repressed Victorian feelings about sex and violence, allowing public talk about taboos. But that shift from indifference to a crisis of conscience shows how extreme horror forced society to confront uncomfortable truths about poverty and neglect. Sources mention respectable Victorian women actually going into Whitechapel, doing charity work, directly because of the conditions the murders exposed.
But it also fueled negative sentiments.
Yes, unfortunately. It fed existing anti-Semitism. Some readily blamed Jewish immigrants, a convenient scapegoat. The Ripper's legacy isn't just the crimes, it's how Victorian society projected its own anxieties, failings, and desires onto him. He became a dark mirror.
And the media's role in shaping all this was huge.
Enormous, unprecedented.
Yeah.
The abolition of the paper duty in 1861 made newspapers cheap and accessible, the first real mass media. So the Ripper reporting was widespread, daily, obsessive, creating this compelling drama mystery for the newly literate masses.
And the penny dreadfuls fanned the flames.
Absolutely. Those cheap magazines thrived on the gruesome details, sometimes just making things up for sales. This intense, unregulated media storm fed the public's hunger, but also, by spreading rumors and false leads, seriously hampered the official police investigation. A chaotic mess of information, a powerful early example of sensationalism, distorting truth and hindering justice.
Then there's this incredible twist, an unintended positive impact.
It's astonishing, really. Despite the horror, the Ripper murders brought intense and unprecedented attention to the appalling conditions in the East End, exposed this festering wound to the whole nation.
You mentioned George Bernard Shaw's comment.
Right, his cynical observation that the press, previously blind to the suffering, suddenly got outraged about Whitechapel's poverty because of the murders. He suggested the Ripper inadvertently spurred social awareness, a kind of communism, as he put it, making people aware of communal problems. Even Queen Victoria got involved, questioning the police and suggesting practical things like better street lighting.
And this led to actual changes, tangible results.
Yes, remarkably so. Immediate improvements in street lighting in the area. Dangerous narrow alleys like Castle Alley were widened to make them safer, easier to see into. And crucially, notorious slum areas like Flower and Dean Street, considered among London's worst, were actually cleared and rebuilt within about 6 years. Better housing, although still basic, directly prompted in part by the outcry over the murders.
And legislation, too.
Significant legislative changes followed. The Houses of the Working Classes Act of 1890, the Public Health Amendment Act of 1890, aimed at tackling slums and improving sanitation across Britain, catalyzed partly by the stark spotlight the Ripper case threw onto urban squalor. So these unsolved horrors, tragically, had this profound unintended positive effect, spurring long overdue urban planning, public health, and social welfare reforms.
It's an incredible dark irony. And finally, his legacy in popular culture. He's just everywhere, isn't he? An immortal myth.
Absolutely dominant, terrifying, unresolved, with that irresistible Gothic allure of Victorian London. You see him in early novels like The Watcher, modern books like The Name of the Star, adding supernatural twists. Countless films, the 1959 Jack the Ripper, Murder by Decree, putting Sherlock Holmes on the case. TV shows galore, Doctor Who, Star Trek, Babylon 5, Time Cop.
Don't comics...
It's like Batman. God don't bite gaslight.
And the tourism aspect.
Oh yeah, the actual murder sites in Whitechapel are now part of this macabre tourist industry. Specialized tours bringing the history, the atmosphere, the theories to life for enthusiasts worldwide.
Why? Why does he endure so intensely?
Fundamentally, because he was never identified or arrested. That's the key. Unlike other infamous killers we know, whose stories have an end, the Ripper remains this specter of the past, unknown, unseen, which invites endless speculation and creative reinterpretation.
The lack of closure fuels the myth.
Precisely. That void allows for countless theories. Royal plots, supernatural forces, aliens, whatever you want. It keeps the narrative alive, adaptable, always relevant somehow. The police failure inadvertently turned him from a criminal into this powerful, almost immortal cultural archetype. It shows how unresolved mysteries can be far more potent, more enduring than closed cases. We keep filling the void with our own fears and fascinations.
So we come full circle. Back to that statement. You wouldn't last a night in Jack the Ripper's London after everything we've discussed. It's not just drama, is it?
Not at all. It feels chillingly accurate. A reflection of a specific, dangerous, historically potent reality.
That unique combination of factors.
Exactly. The extreme poverty, the brutal work, the social tensions, the prejudice, the primitive policing, the lack of science, all layered onto the Ripper's own brutality and compounded by things like the Thames torso murders. It created this uniquely terrifying environment.
And the unsolved part is key to his lasting fame.
It's the engine, the very thing that keeps the fascination burning. It's not just a historical footnote. It's what makes him endure.
The power of the unknown. It's truly profound. How he transformed from a real person, a criminal, into this enduring myth, constantly reshaped.
It underscores our fascination with what we can't know, what lurks just beyond our understanding. The case remains this dark, compelling lens on Victorian society, its vulnerabilities, and our own attraction to the macabre, the unresolved.
It makes you think, doesn't it?
It really does. It encourages you, the listener, to consider what modern societal vulnerabilities, what systemic failures might be creating our era's unsolved horrors. How easily can we neglect the most vulnerable today? How might our own information age with its overload and noise, obscure truth, just as prejudice and rumor did back then?
Are we really so different?
A thought-provoking question to carry with you. We really encourage you to continue your own deep dives, always looking for those nuances, those systemic connections, and the complex issues we face today.
Thank you so much for joining us for this deep dive into the shadows of Whitechapel.